Illinois, and I'm director here at the Rutgers Education and Employment Research Center. And I'm so delighted to welcome you all today to our meeting where we will be talking about our updated non-credit data taxonomy, our 3.0. So we're really excited to unveil that today and to share that with you all, and then have some reactions from some of our state colleagues on the taxonomy. So just to give you an overview of what to expect today. Mark D'Amico, a professor of higher ed at UNC Charlotte, who is a co-PI on the State Non-Credit Data Project and been leading this project with me since the very beginning, will be talking about the latest version of the taxonomy today and sharing with you all the work that's gone into updating that. And all the new features that we have in the new taxonomy. And after Mark, we're thrilled to have some of our great colleagues from states around the country working with their experiences working with the taxonomy and different efforts that they've been engaged in to improve non-credit data collection. So Gina Romano, Assistant Vice President of Workforce Data and Analytics and Outcomes from Ivy Tech Community College, will be sharing the work that she's been engaged in using the taxonomy and more broadly. And also Carolyn McKinnon, Policy Associate for Workforce Education from Washington State Board for Community and Technical Colleges, will also be sharing some of the work that she and others in Washington State have been doing with non-credit data and ways that they've engaged with the taxonomy. So without further ado, I'll hand things over to Mark to begin to share the updated taxonomy.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks to everyone for joining us today to engage with us about this next version of the taxonomy. Hopefully, some of you are familiar with the previous versions. We'll talk about those a little bit and talk about what went into this new version. But just really glad that you all could engage with us today. So I do want to acknowledge co-authors on the project, of course, Michelle as our project leader, and Justin Vinton and Nicole Sandler-Boyd, both from the EERC as well. It was definitely a team effort to work on this over the past several months. So just to give you a brief overview of the State Non-Credit Data Project, if you're new to us, we started about 5 years ago with 3 states, Iowa, Louisiana, and Virginia, to learn about their non-credit data infrastructure. We were able to work with them with their program level data to get a better sense of what data were collected at the state level. And it allowed us to create our taxonomy 1.0 version. We didn't call it 1.0 then, but we know it as our 1.0 now. And then we were able to expand with 5 other states with their higher education data: Maryland, New Jersey, Oregon, South Carolina, and Tennessee. I should mention that the higher ed data were all community college data, community and technical college data. And we were also so pleased to have the New Jersey Department of Labor join us in that second phase. We learned an incredible amount that informed the Taxonomy 2.0 by getting that State Department of Labor perspective. So really grateful for all of our partners from the 8 states. During that second phase, we also established the national learning community that you all are a part of and are joining us here through the national learning community today. So the current phase of the project, which we call national expansion, really the much of this has been about coming up with this 3.0 version of the taxonomy that we're going to talk about today. But we also have state policy and governance scans that are underway right now, and you'll be hearing more about those in the coming months. And then we have a series of specialized working groups for state level individuals who work for state level organizations, and I'll mention those too. So the National Learning Community is for absolutely anyone who is interested, and we're so glad, again, that you're a part of it. And then the specialized working groups are for state level individuals, and we get support from many really important and engaged organizations, as you can see here on the slide. So the foundation of much of our work is the non-credit data taxonomy. This is the 2.0 version. If you've been familiar with our work and been to previous presentations, you're probably familiar with this. We have 4 different main categories: purpose and design, outcomes, enrollment, demographics, finance, and policy. And there were 90 data elements along some of these subcategories. So that is not the current version. But let me take you through a little bit of the history of this. So 1.0, as I mentioned, was community college data from Iowa, Louisiana, and Virginia. Then we added five new state partners as we created the 2.0 version, including New Jersey Department of Labor. And then for this version, for 3.0, we really had the pleasure and great opportunity of looking through other national data sources and frameworks to do some comparing between those sources and frameworks with the taxonomy. And so they included Credential Engine and their credential registry, and we had lots of really good conversations with Jeannie Hutchins, Jared Diener, and Rachel Vilsack from Credential Engine, and appreciate all of their input. John Furr and Dana Drant, rather, from Strata, and their work with collaborators on the Model Workforce Pell Data Framework, as well as Pearl, which is the U.S. Department of Labor's Participant Individual Record Layout, and lastly, Rapids, the Registered Apprenticeship Partners Information Database System. So with colleagues on the project looking at these frameworks and through some partnerships and conversations, we were able to compare the current, now previous taxonomy with some of these frameworks and try to improve what we were doing. So these are the five different sources that we use. I've mentioned a few of them already. I will also mention the first one, the commonly collected SNDP, that State Non-Credit Data Project, data elements. So where we really started this work was looking at the program level data with our state partners to see what was commonly collected, and also in engaging with our partners, seeing maybe some of the priorities that they had moving forward. So all of the descriptions of these different sources are in the report, beyond even the brief definitions that we provide here to describe some of our findings. I will say that, and I'll give you a QR code for the Taxonomy 3.0 report here shortly, but in the appendix of the report, we included our cross-checking against these different data sources and frameworks, so you can see which of our data elements in Taxonomy 2.0, which ultimately informed 3.0, were also included in these different frameworks. Also in the current taxonomy, you'll see now all of the updated data elements, because there are many things that we did as we looked through these data sources and frameworks. One is we looked at different data elements that they collected to help us update, generate some new ideas. A lot of those were around Workforce Pell. Also looking at the different definitions and data element names helped us inform some changes that we've made. And then also looking for that alignment, because we know states in particular, but as well as institutions and other workforce providers, are using some of these other frameworks for the work that they do. And so hopefully what we included in the appendix will help you see where there's some of that crossover, perhaps as you're working on one effort, that it can align with some others. So let's cut straight to Taxonomy 3.0. So this is the current or brand new taxonomy that we're releasing today. So we do still have four primary categories, but we have a number of tweaks that I want to walk us through. So some key updates include consolidation of subcategories. So for instance, program design and delivery, we brought those together into even a more robust set of data elements, but we found some really important alignment there, in addition to accessibility and student services. So everything from admission requirements to how students are served, we saw some alignment there and brought some of those together into a category, their own category, combined category. We also did some work to differentiate between program and student outcomes. So purpose and design is largely about program level data. We've focused a lot on program level data through our project, but now the student outcomes section, we've focused even more and tried to describe here further how these are really student level outcome data and outcome data elements. And so that helps to differentiate between what we have as associated non-degree credentials, for instance, under purpose and design, and the student outcomes, which are the non-degree credentials among the many that outcomes that are really at the student level. So try to differentiate that further. I will say there have been additional changes, enrollment and completion. While completion may sound like a student level outcome, things like enrollment dates and completion dates really better fit within enrollment data rather than outcome data. So you'll see some of that in the current taxonomy. We broke out state funding and federal funding as there have been additional nuances there, Workforce Pell and others, as well as policy relevant program outcomes. And a lot of that is truly informed by Workforce Pell. So with some of this expansion, we've moved from 90 data elements in Taxonomy 2.0 to 119 in Taxonomy 3.0, and you can see all of those with data definitions, brief data definitions. And I'll give you some examples of those in just a few minutes. Um, and then lastly, and we'll get to this as well, as we've expanded data elements now to nearly 120, and we think about how to provide a really usable guide for states and even institutions and others moving forward. We narrowed down our list of 19 to 52 data elements that we're calling the SNDP core. And I'll show that to you in just a minute as well. And the QR code that you see on this slide will take you straight to the Taxonomy 3.0 document. A little later, I'll show you the QR code for the project overall, and you can browse the Taxonomy 3.0 file as well as others. And thank you, Melissa, for putting the link to that file in the chat as well, so others can pull it down that way. Okay, so I mentioned the SNDP core, and we provide this in the document within our how-to guide to mention the 52 data elements or list out the 52 data elements that we consider to be pretty essential for non-credit data collection at the state level, potentially with other uses at the institution level, and other opportunities. But things from course and program name to ZIP codes to program length to start and end dates to associated credentials to demographics to headcount enrollments to program tuition and fees and workforce Pell eligibility. What we consider, again, reviewing these other data sources and frameworks, thinking about workforce Pell and other policy relevance. And if it's not workforce Pell, it might be accountability reporting for that's required for if non-credit is funded by the state. So we consider these to be the 52 essential data elements. However, we also know that there is a lot of attention for workforce Pell right now. We certainly talk about it a lot within the State Non-Credit Data Project and have partners who are thinking about it. So we've also included additional workforce Pell essential elements not included in the State Non-Credit Data Project core. So where do these come from? So I mentioned that the model workforce Pell data framework that was developed by the Workforce Pell Data Collaborative that Strata leads and we are a part of, as well as other partners here who are on the call and we talk with frequently. We looked at the model workforce Pell essential elements that are articulated in the framework. And if they're not included in our 52 data elements that we consider to be the core non-credit data elements that have use cases beyond workforce Pell, we included them here in a supplemental part of the core, not part of the 52, but also really important. So these are mapped pretty much directly to the model workforce Pell data framework. And in our taxonomy document, you'll see within the table provided there, the core elements as well as these to make an easy reference. And then if you were to look in the document, I know that this is pretty small. We're not going to talk about individual data elements, but you'll see four pretty long tables that outline the entire taxonomy with all 119 data elements. So I provided just the top end of each of the four categories: purpose and design, category two on the right, student outcomes. Three is enrollment and demographics, and four is finance and policy. And so within each of these four sections, you will find all of the subcategories and the individual data elements. You'll also notice the operational definitions. I will mention that many of these data elements, we have tweaked the names a little bit as we've learned from these other data sources and frameworks. And we also offer pretty brief operational definitions, and that's intentional. We know that some of the data sources and frameworks that we checked against, that you all may be using as well, maybe provide very detailed data definitions, and we love that about those frameworks. We also recognize when it comes to non-credit data, especially housed at the state level, that there are a lot of state definitions out there, and we wanted to respect some of those nuances that occur at the institution level and state level and try to provide really brief data definitions where you can be checking those against your operational definitions to see if they essentially, match in spirit in terms of, practicality, but we aren't so prescriptive in our definitions to say, oh, there's only one way to operationalize this, because we know that there are nuances there, and we want to honor those nuances as we talk with states and institutional partners and such. So that takes you through the four areas. We encourage you to browse those in detail in the document. And then I also want to touch base on our how-to guide for engaging in the non-credit data journey. The data journey is what we call it. We know that there is a starting point, which is, wherever you are, and we haven't found an ending point yet. It's something that's ongoing, and I think that's the way we look at our taxonomy too. We want it to continue to evolve. But basically, step one, if your state or institution or organization already has non-credit data, it's to inventory what you have, to think about partnerships where maybe some data are matched, and look at the state data governance. If you're at an institution, what do you report up to your state system or organization? If you're in a state organization, who do you partner with to match maybe for outcomes data? Do you report your data to a state longitudinal data system? That's some of that state governance and ecosystem piece that we want you to think about. Whether or not you have any data, if you don't have data on non-credit right now, we encourage you to just jump straight to step two. And that's beginning with the SNDP core data elements. But if you do have data, we encourage you to look at your inventory and compare it with the SNDP core, certainly as well as the other data elements, and really think about what your priorities are, and have an agenda for expansion over time. And hopefully the taxonomy can be helpful with that. And then choose a data platform that allows for interconnectivity, especially that interconnectivity with outcomes data. But interconnectivity also means something different now, especially as we think about that workforce Pell priority that all states probably have right now. And, some of that might be thinking about, are your non-credit data in a system that also connects with credit? Because we know non-credit to credit articulation is important. How about with financial aid? Since we know Pell eligibility and those requirements are going to be an important part of any non-credit programs that have been deemed approved for workforce Pell. Okay, then step four, building data partnerships rather, especially when it comes to those outcomes data. And that's measuring not just completions, but some of the labor market outcomes that we know are so important beyond completion, like employment, and ultimately it will be employment in field and such. So, and then step five, engaging with statewide and national data ecosystems. If you're here today, you are engaging in a non-credit data ecosystem with one another. We're so glad you're here. But also be thinking about those different state systems and organizations and other national partners as there are opportunities to engage around workforce Pell or credential frameworks and others. We encourage you to engage with us as well as others. So I want to briefly mention, especially if you're in a state organization, we have these state level specialized working groups that are ongoing right now as a part of the State Non-Credit Data Project. So just some brief snippets here. There's one on the workforce Pell landscape that Amy Cable from Louisiana is leading, one on non-credit to credit alignment that Denise Ziske from SUNY is leading. Paula Nissen, our partner, is leading one on aligning education data and labor market information. Rachel Boone from Iowa Board of Regents is looking at building the four-year non-credit data taxonomy, really looking at this taxonomy and determining how applicable it is in the university sector. And then another one we haven't kicked off yet is on telling the story of non-degree and non-credit training. So if you're interested, and if you're at in a state organization, you're interested, please email Paula or reach out to us and we can get you connected. So if you would like a link to the State Non-Credit Data Project, you can certainly access all of our files here, all of our reports and such. But without further ado, I want to turn it over to our colleagues Gina Romano from Ivy Tech, as well as Carolyn McKinnon from the Washington State Board for Community and Technical Colleges to reflect on the non-credit data taxonomy and what they've been able to do with it, as well as their priorities for non-credit data collection. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gina.
Thanks so much, Mark. Let me just start the presentation. Okay, I think we got it. Hi, everyone. I'm Gina Romano from Ivy Tech Community College, and I'm going to provide a little bit of a discussion about how Ivy Tech applied the non-credit data taxonomy version 2.0, but also our reflections on 3.0. So a quick overview for those of you who don't or might not be familiar with Ivy Tech. Ivy Tech is the largest public post-secondary system in Indiana. This is important for the context and the scale of our non-credit data work. We serve approximately 200,000 learners annually across 41 campus and satellite locations across Indiana. So pretty wide. Our mission centers on fueling Indiana's economy through teaching excellence and proactive engagement with industry and community partners. And just with the sheer size and geographic spread of the system is part of what makes this non-credit data management so challenging and why this taxonomy was so useful for us. So a quick roadmap for the session and the four areas I'm going to be covering today. I'm going to be looking at why we use the taxonomy, so thinking about the context and why we adopted this taxonomy in the first place. How we use the taxonomy, so I'm going to go through a practical walkthrough of how we apply the taxonomy and utilize it with our non-credit data. Who uses the taxonomy? So I'm going to go over a few of our use cases, preliminary right now, of how we're using the taxonomy, and then reflections of 3.0. So why we use the taxonomy. So this section is about setting the context and why we even use the taxonomy in the first place. Non-credit data has historically been fragmented and inconsistent, no matter where you look. And it's the same at our institution. It's in different areas, different locations. It's not collected in the same manner as some of our academic data. So the context is really rich for us to have some type of structure for this non-credit data. So we needed a common language and a framework to talk about our non-credit offerings. And this taxonomy gave us a starting point to kind of start thinking about it. Without it, we're dealing with different definitions, different systems, and no consistent way to report or analyze our non-credit activity. So a little bit of a primer, when I talk about skills training classes throughout this presentation, those are our non-credit courses. And so they're also known as workforce training, continuing education, professional development, those types of certification types of classes. And they're short-term training programs designed to build in-demand competencies quickly. And so when we have these skills training courses, those are what the non-credit courses are. And a huge part of this is a huge part of what community colleges do. It's often but it's also the least well documented in our system sometimes. So within our non-credit data, we have multiple locations where the data is stored. It's not all in one system. It's here and there. So it makes it hard for us to have a complete picture of where our building blocks are for understanding and answering questions related to non-credit. Our use cases vary, so does the completeness of our data. And the data quality is also inconsistent. Some fields are well maintained, but other ones, they're not really well maintained. If it's something for accountability or has some funding tied to it, it's usually well maintained, but other areas, it might be blank. So also definitions are a big issue. So that's why I think the taxonomy has been so great for this, is because different departments or campuses or teams might have different definitions of the data. So how we use the taxonomy. So now I'm going to talk about the practical application of how we utilize this taxonomy, the version 2.0. The focus here is on looking at the practical nature of this, and then a little bit of context. So I've been at Ivy Tech for less than a year. And so this using taxonomy was a way for me to acquaint myself with the non-credit world. I met with Mark and Michelle, and I was introduced to the taxonomy, and I wanted to find a way to use it to kind of just understand the whole non-credit side of data within Ivy Tech. I'd like to also give a shout out to Leighton Johnson and Jess Jagger at Ivy Tech. They're the non-credit data experts. And they just knew it really well. They're very experienced, and they helped me with this project significantly. So I can be, a budget, hopefully an expert one day. So applying the taxonomy. So as you can see on the left, I took the appendix for version 2.0, and I applied it to a Google spreadsheet. And it's a living document where I can adapt the fields as necessary and figure out what makes sense for our specific context. So in addition to the fields that were in the appendix, I also added availability at Ivy Tech. Is it available across all of our non-credit offerings, or is it only available for what we call WRG is Workforce Ready grants? So these are tied to WIOA funding. So they have more accountability, more red tape aligned with them, so we have to collect that data. The location, because there's so many different locations for the non-credit data. Whether it's required for Workforce Pell, so that's why I was so happy to see the Taxonomy 3.0, because I know that's something that's been in our minds about how we're going to be collecting the data for Workforce Pell at Ivy Tech. And then just notes about the data, something we might want to know when we're looking through it. Something that I'm also building out as well is the difficulty in data collection and validation, the overall data quality, and then the overall priority level for Ivy Tech. As Mark discussed, there's very many fields in the taxonomy, so wanted to see what would be the priority level for us. And this is still a project work in progress. As I said, this is kind of like taking an inventory. It's that step one of us looking at this data, but then it's continuously improving, and we're adding more information to it. So this is a larger screenshot of the actual document that we use. Once again, it's a living Google sheet. There's multiple collaborators on it, so we can go in there, we can add, we can take away, we can use it for different types of projects. So the key point is just isn't a one-time exercise. We're always revisiting this and updating it as the data landscape evolves. Just even this afternoon, I had a meeting about zip codes and how they work for non-credit data, and I learned some more information, so I did some more refinements to this document. So having it in a shared editable format makes it more easy to use, and people can contribute to it. So then I'm going to transition to who uses the taxonomy. So looking at some of those use cases. This is about showing how the taxonomy has become more of a communication and decision-making tool across our institution and beyond. And I want you to know that that you can use this to some of our use cases for how you might replicate using the taxonomy in your own institutions. So I want to emphasize that these are preliminary use cases. Once again, I've been with Ivy Tech for about a year, so this is going to continue to be refined, but these are some of our use cases that we've developed already. So the first one, as I mentioned, the initial purpose was a data inventory. We wanted to look at our data. We wanted to see how valid it was. Was it verifiable? Was it complete? Where was it located? So this taxonomy really fit that use nicely because I was able to use the taxonomy and look at our data and try to have some structure to it and understand where things were, how complete they were, and use this to kind of check and look at the building blocks of where we can build to our next use case, which is return on investment and outcomes mapping. So once we have this data, we can start thinking about like how are we going to use it for outcomes related to research evaluation or strategic planning. So we just rolled out our new strategic plan, and I'm already, non-credit is going to be part of that as well. And thinking about what data we need to be collecting, how complete it is, where it's located. So it's very helpful and it merges nicely with that. The third use case is policy decisions. Once again, workforce Pell has been, on everybody's mind, and that's definitely something that we were thinking about when we were looking at the non-credit data taxonomy. Once again, the workforce ready grants, we need to be collecting some of this non-credit data for funding purposes. And so it was really important for us to have some fields in there as well to see which data points would be necessary for that. Finally, this use case for the data taxonomy was to build partnerships. So we have a partnership with the Center for Regional Economic Competitiveness, and this is to look at the ROI for skills training or non-credit courses for advanced manufacturing. And so this has been really helpful for us to understand which data elements we want to look at for ROI. Also, we have a partnership with Credlens, and Credlens is a nonprofit data trust that works with the third-party certification and other types of outcomes attached to it. So when we're wanting to share our non-credit data with them, it's really helpful for us to understand just from a mapping perspective and thinking about like what data we're going to be sharing and how complete it is. It's really just helpful for us to be speaking the same language with them. Reflections on the non-credit data taxonomy 3.0. I just want to share like what we noticed in the new version, how it informs our work. So I really appreciated the SNDP core. I know I felt a little overwhelmed when I looked at the appendix the first time and seeing all the data elements. So I think a great starting point is those 52 essential data elements. I think that'll help you give a good starting point and a gentle introduction to this really great tool. Also, as mentioned, the workforce spell alignment is a really big deal. I'm going to definitely be going back into that document and revising the field to align it with the 3.0 document to ensure that we're collecting, the same types of non-credit data elements that are necessary for workforce Pell. And then finally, looking across federal and national data frameworks, I think that shows how the data taxonomy fits into the bigger picture, and especially with the conversations we're having with the non-credit data, cross-referencing with the different, credential engine, rapids, and more. That kind of helps show that this fits into a bigger picture and it's not an isolated tool. Also, the inclusion of student data is very helpful as well, kind of thinking of like program versus student data. I think that'll be a nice addition for when institutions are thinking about how they're collecting data. Finally, some key takeaways. A common vocabulary from this taxonomy helps helps us have a shared understanding of how we can talk and manage expectations for non-credit data. I think, especially with the different definitions, if you have one way that you can translate and speak to each other, then it's a lot easier to work together. Also, as I said, this is a living tool. This is something that's continuously being revised, as Marcus said as well. We're in version 3.0, but you don't just read the taxonomy. You want to be able to adapt it and use it, and that's why we used a Google Sheet to, take the information and continuously update it. I think another takeaway is that these partnerships across departments are really helpful for us to understand where this data is living and like how we can work together to meet some of these goals, especially like workforce Pell. And then the Taxonomy 3.0s and the core and the workforce Pell alignment make it easier to get started and stay aligned. And I think that's it for now. Let me get out of this, but I can bring it. There we go. There we go. Carolyn, I think it's your turn if you'd like. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Gina. Gosh, I wish I could just say ditto what Gina said. I'm going to get sorted to share my screen and then get sorted to share my slides. All right, folks, how does that look? Mark, are we good? Excellent. Well, hey, everybody, I'm Carolyn McKinnon. I'm a staffer to Washington State's Board for Community and Technical Colleges. A quick rundown on our organization. Our system is made up of 34 colleges serving about 307,000 students each year. Those are heads. And we offer 3,700 workforce credential options across our system. Those are credit options. I'm going to talk about non-credit. I'll get there. We also offer academic transfer, over 120 applied baccalaureate degrees, adult basic education, and continuing education, which is comprised of personal enrichment, corporate and contract training, and workforce-oriented or occupation-oriented non-credit course and program offerings. Our agency is a 9-member board, governor appointed, Senate confirmed. We have about 240 staff. We're a fiscal agent and a strategic policy coordinator. We submit a single operating and capital budget to our governor and our legislature on behalf of all the colleges. And important for this conversation, we've implemented and operate our system-wide campus solution using PeopleSoft CTC Link. So that's the ERP platform for our entire system. And we also maintain the system's data warehouse, accountability reporting, and plug all the numbers into the state allocation model. A couple of notes on that. Non-credit continuing education is not in the state allocation model, no state support. Those are self-supported offerings at this time. And then we're able to batch all of our employment and wage outcomes for wage file matching for all credit programs. We're able to batch all of our ETPL uploads for all credit programs, but we're not doing that at this time for non-credit because we don't have the data. So that's why I'm here. I'm the lead staffer to our system's non-credit task force. In our federated system, we use task forces and working groups to do strategic work in a systems approach. This task force is chaired by 2 college presidents. Our co-sponsor is our agency's Deputy Executive Director for Education. And then we have really robust representation of a lot of different viewpoints of our system. Continuing ed deans and directors, workforce credit, that's what I mean when I say workforce credit, education, deans and directors, our diversity, diversity, inclusion, equity officers, registrars, financial aid officers, that level of engagement. And what we're talking about in this task force is how do we recognize non-credit offerings and credentials as integral contributors to workforce education throughout our system? How do we more intentionally align non-credit offerings with our system's mission, vision, and strategic priorities? How do we develop more transparent, visible pathways for bridging from non-credit to credit for our learners? And so those are the questions our task force is examining through a bunch of different lines of inquiry. But the top 3 are, let's get some common definitions. What do we mean when we say non-credit? Let's look at our data environment, our data warehouse, and our CTC Link functionality. And so we have started using the taxonomy to understand what do we currently have, where are the gaps. And the taxonomy has been instrumental. I'll get to some examples and report out what we found, but pretty quickly after doing definitions and a simple kind of inventory, our task force was ready to say, it looks like we need some transformation around non-credit data. It's a small statement, but it's a huge leap forward. How might we standardize our non-credit workforce course and enrollment data to mesh with the same data that we collect for the credit-bearing programs? And so, to Mark's point exactly about the taxonomy versus like all the different operational definitions that are out there, the definitions really do matter. I credit one of our research associate director, Travis, with non-credit is like an omelet. Like we know what an omelet is, but the ingredients are going to vary whether you're in Denver or out on the West Coast. So just using the taxonomy to walk through with that diverse a group of people and talk about definitions was transformative for us. And a couple of things I want to acknowledge before briefing you on what we learned from using the taxonomy for that inventory is first, we really have to acknowledge a tension that's existing in our system that our continuing ed folks who offer non-credit work-related courses and programs, they pride themselves on a very agile registration experience for the learner. We don't want friction there when they're choosing to take a class. And so there's this tension with like, you start talking about data and we're talking about robust data capture. We want to know who your students are, where they're going, where they came from. So that we have to acknowledge that tension. And then I also wanted to acknowledge roles and responsibilities that really helped us clarify our lines of inquiry as we seek transformation about non-credit data. Who are behind the why? Why are we tracking what we're tracking? In our agency, it's the education division because we make policy. But broadly, who's responsible for the why? Who's responsible for the what? What needs to be tracked and coded? Who's responsible for the how the information is captured, in our case, into CTC Link? And how do we make meaning of all of this? Our research department helps turn that information or that data into information. So just a couple of lessons learned from me to you. And very similar to Gina, I took the taxonomy appendix, I pulled it into Excel, put it into a OneDrive, and worked with our data warehouse manager and our CTC Link functionality campus solutions lead. And they went through and did the hard work of really inventorying, do we capture it? Yes, no, maybe, what do we really mean? And so we've got the 4 sections of Taxonomy 2.0 unpacked for our system. And the outcome has been lots of new questions, refining our definitions, and digging into what's the have to have versus the nice to have data. What's the have to have for Workforce Pell or ETPL versus nice to have. So here are our findings walking through the 4 sections of Taxonomy 2.0. In the purpose and design section, which is about those course level offerings, we're pretty solid with our non-credit data. We have the course names, we have SIPs, we can distinguish between workforce-oriented or occupation-oriented courses and contract training, for example. For outcomes, when you see the CNED career, that's just the section of CTC Link that's holding the non-credit data. We're really not built out for outcomes. And so, especially not labor market outcomes. So there's an opportunity to use some of the functionality that's used at the credit side to get there. Enrollment and demographics. Course enrollment constructs are pretty strong. We can count learners and registrations, but we don't know much about their characteristics. Demographics is really minimal and depends on which door our students enter through. And then finance and policy, essentially nil. We don't capture anything. So I'll hang out here just for a minute with this example of what we know about students depends on which door they come through. And we've got a lot of different doors. I won't go through them. There's lots of words on your screen, but what I would tell you is just looking at that part of the taxonomy enabled us to open up this door conversation and dig into, well, how do we balance that tension between a very frictionless registration experience through Quick Admit or Campus CE versus our full-blown online admissions process? We think we have a solution to create a less friction experience for our non-credit learners and be able to capture more data, more information about who they are. So we're getting there. As we turn from 2.0 to 3.0, I mean, really, Gina, a lot of what you said, like ditto what you said. We think it's going to be a tool for ongoing refinement of our language, our definitions. We'll get to operation and policy as this task force cultivates system buy-in about like, well, what exactly does data transformation mean and what resources does it cost? We'll get there. But that cycle, this virtuous cycle of common language leading to definitions, to operational definitions, and surprise, we find inconsistencies and some very eye-opening creative uses of certain data fields. And that gives us the opportunity to further refine for our data quality. Taxonomy 3.0 is going to continue to be a great tool for communicating with our data services and campus solution teams, but also I expect with our Workforce Pell implementation team and a number of other partners. It's going to help us clarify that have to have data using the core versus the nice to have stuff. And then there are a lot of interoperability kind of, for us, aspirational elements of Taxonomy 3.0 around the external interoperability with Pell, the credential transparency, and so forth. So we're excited, but we're not quite there yet. And so that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gina and Carolyn. We really appreciate hearing your stories and how you've been using the taxonomy in addition to getting some more insights about what's happening within your institution or state just around non-credit data overall. I think that's, it's a really important and compelling story to listen to because we know that there are so many of those stories here among our participants on our meeting today. With that, I'll turn it over to Michelle, who I think is going to facilitate some Q&A.
Thanks, Mark. So we are open now for any questions. And as Mark noted, I think there are many people that we have in this room today who are working hard on these questions and issues. And so I wanted to invite anybody to who has a question or a comment or thought about how this might be relevant to your work or any thoughts from anybody in the group here? Okay, thanks. We have a question in the chat from Holly Zanville. Can Ivy Tech in Washington talk about whether setting up non-credit data systems will inform LERs or digital wallets?
Gina, are you're probably closer to this reality than we are.
Yeah, so I know we've had discussions like about like digital wallets and things like that. Um, I don't have much knowledge about how like we would set up those systems to inform that. Um, I know we're just now like gearing up like how we're going to be doing payment systems online and things like that, and getting some of that finance for the non-credit world. So I'd have to do some more research on this because I think we're just still up and implementing some of that and having some conversations about how the non-credit data systems can do that.
Yeah,
I think just, oh, go ahead, Carolyn, please.
In Washington, I know our state workforce board is very interested in supporting and helping facilitate adoption of LERs and digital wallets. Our system's doing a great job with digital badging, which is kind of a good foot in the door. On the non-credit side, I'm still in the space of kind of imagining we need to build out our data before it's going to feel possible to really imagine implementing those things.
The only other thing I wanted to add is, in taking it back to the taxonomy, is how important it is when it comes to the non-degree credentials to be able to capture data on whether or not credentials are aligned with programs, and that fits within purpose and design, but then also uh, tracking those credential earning data for individuals. Because, to have data for programs is great. It's important. It's important for workforce Pell. But if you're looking at the LER space, it's so much about having those data for individuals as well. And that's one of the reasons why we articulated student in that outcomes division, because there are different use cases for program level alignment, credential alignment data and outcomes data versus the student level. So just want to throw that out there, regarding the taxonomy.
And Robin, Miguel, looks like you have a question or comment to bring.
Hey, thanks, everybody. This is kind of a wonky question, but I figure I'm in the right space for that. And my question, I saw a lot on the taxonomy about zip codes. And so I wonder if the presenters could talk a little bit about your philosophy of assigning zip codes to non-credit programs. Are you assigning based on content, or are you assigning kind of those enrichment codes that don't go to iPads? And then I guess part two of my question is about the degree designation, or like iPads level. How are you distinguishing the credit and non-credit?
I'll jump in. I'm a recovering wonk, like data wonk, so I'm really out of date with a lot of these concepts. Our I'm sorry, I got distracted. Our approach is we have really robust systems on the credit side. And so our thinking is we're going to use the same constructs for non-credit. I don't know the answer to the iPads question.
Yeah, I would echo what Carolyn was saying as well. I know for zip codes that it's really built out obviously for our academic side. For our non-credit side, it's for our WIOA, our Workforce Ready grant. And for those zip codes, I know there's a process for it. I am not the person who does it. And once again, I've been with Ivy Tech for less than a year. But there is like a process for that we have to work with the state. And there's a task force to kind of put together what the zip codes would be for the different types of non-credit. It's very standardized. I know like that we have to put them in a system. But I don't know all the steps for it right now of how we do that. I think it is somewhat similar to like kind of like what we do with the academic side. We use from that to inform what we're doing for non-credit.
I should mention that we do have a SIP dictionary that's adopted as policy within our system. So our coding manual references our system's SIP coding manual. And so in that, for non-credit offerings, we definitely have coding guidance that If it's a work skills outcome non-credit offering, it needs to have a SIP code aligned to that. And if it's personal enrichment, it goes into one of those codes.
Got it. Thank you. I'll, confess that we're the academic unit and we're trying to kind of mesh those two of how do we take the functioning system that we're using for credit bearing and fit the non-credit in it so we can compare apples to apples eventually. And so we're trying to make this decision of which fork do we go down, and how do we distinguish the two while keeping the data structures sort of similar to each other.
I will just mention, Robin, one of our specialized working groups is looking at aligning education data and labor market information. I know they're talking about SIP codes, they're talking about SIP to SOC relationships and some other things. So that may be a good group to continue some dialogue with. And if they've already, I don't know if they've touched on that topic already, but they're reach out to Paula, and if you haven't been a part of those.
Yeah, Paula can point you to resources. We have a lot of recordings
Right.
and things that are available to state folks who are engaged in the specialized working groups. So, okay, well, maybe we have time for one more question here. I know Kim Kirkpatrick put in the chat, does anyone have a minimum length for training?
Just for like non-credit, like our workforce training, our skills training, things like that, I'm assuming. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, that's a question that sometimes comes up. Is there a minimum length at which you start to count it as a program? I think is maybe the intention there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does a 2 hour program, count,
Yeah.
right?
No, this is a great question because we were actually just trying to think about this and conceptualize it because we're going to be sharing we're finally able to share our non-credit data to start doing some wage matching, and we were thinking about, well, how long should it be? We can't be doing everything. It has to be like a certain amount. So I think we established. I can pull this up, but I think it's four contact out. I have to double check that, but we wanted to make sure that there was like a minimum as well. Like, like you said, we don't want it to be like, half a day or something like that. So, let me check it.
Yeah, that was thank you for your response, but that's what we are doing, the wage matching, and it's really messing up that SIP to SOC thing when the training is so short. So short that they're really getting low occupations, like not even in the same field. They're food prep and whatnot. And so it's like maybe there should be a threshold before it's even expected to get you into an occupation that we just saw a lot of these low-level certificates that the people were bartending and doing food prep. That was their occupation after they completed.
Yeah, that's something we're looking at too, especially with our Credlens portal of seeing some of like where our students in the Credlens they can match the data to outcomes like employment and things like that, and eventually wages. And we're kind of seeing, initially there isn't much changes in the employment, but then later on we're hoping like once we have more data, we could start seeing like, are they in the same industry? Are we seeing wage improvements? It really depends, but like you said, the minimum amount that also is a good part of it as well. We have a greater than four student contact hours. I think that was where we had the cutoff, and then we also included specific subjects. We don't want we took out personal enrichment and other types of activities, so we really wanted it to be workforce aligned when we looked at that.
Ballpark, how much is Credlens? I have a colleague on the call, and I've heard the term multiple times, and I just wonder how much we need to budget for that.
I'm not going to give a budget estimate. It goes for different ones, and I know like they definitely work with the system. So I would say just talk to them about it because I know they can be very flexible, especially since they were a startup. So I don't want to give like certain ballpark estimates because they might be widely different, for our context versus yours.
That's a good follow-up question, though, and
Yes.
I think that I'm sure Credlands would welcome any outreach about getting engaged with
Mhm.
the work that they're doing because they're really trying to scale up, and I think there's some good opportunities there. Well, we're at the end of our time, maybe even a little bit over, but I really wanted to just thank everybody for being here. Thank our presenters for sharing all the insights that we have today from the Taxonomy 3.0. I want to encourage everybody to take a look at the report. It's out now. It should be in your inbox, and we'll be sharing out a recording and slides and everything as a follow-up to this. So hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day and look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
Thank you.